Last I saw Gray, he was flying through the air and into some sort of acid bath. I was in bad shape and, well, I passed out. No, you idiot! I just said I never saw him again, didn't I?
I have a confession to make. I am a fraud. Despite making my whole Fallout DLC series, playing at least 1,000 hours across Fallout 3, New Vegas, and even Fallout 76 for Christ's sake, and having Fallout New Vegas easily in my top 5 games of all time, I still have not beaten the original Fallouts. So in light of this, I'll be turning in my Fallout fan card, and I'll be going into a self-imposed exile in the desolate California desert, until I can pay my due respects to these original games and beat them through. Okay, done. And after about 40 hours or so, I'm back, and I've completed Fallout 1 and 2, and now I'm a little mad at myself for not completing these games sooner, but I'll get into that soon, as we got to establish some historical context for these games, which I promise is pretty interesting. Also, this video will be covering the first Fallout game only. Fallout 2 will have its own video, and soon, I promise. But Fallout, which is now a world-famous, multi-million, maybe even billion-dollar IP at this point, all started as a small passion project made solely by programmer turned YouTuber Tim Kaine, who was employed at Interplay Entertainment, the minds behind games like the Bard's Tale series and Mario Teaches Typing. So it's kind of funny that this thing and Fallout came from the same place. Tim was building his game as part of his new isometric engine, which was designed around the GURPS, or Generic Universal Role-Playing System, and the project was coming along well. And soon, Fergus Urquhart, the guy who would later go on to found Obsidian Entertainment, gave Tim Kaine even more resources and manpower to help bring his game to life. And Kaine's idea was to make a computer role-playing game that explored the morality and stories of a world that got shit-rocked by nuclear war, running with the working title of Vault 13, a GURPS post-nuclear role-playing game, which was thankfully just trimmed down to Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game, because Vault 13, insert subtitle here, hits nowhere near as hard as just Fallout. However, despite a motivated team with a killer idea, the game had a bit of a turbulent development, mostly due to the generally chaotic environment of working at Interplay, which seemed to have a sort of fuck-it-we-ball approach to game dev, based on the dev's own words. And also during development, Fallout lost its GURPS license because the creator of GURPS, Steve Jackson, was appalled at how violent and gory Fallout was. Notably the cutscene of 2 power-armored soldiers executing a prisoner that you see in like the first minute of booting the game up. So it's kind of wild looking back and seeing that this amount of violence was considered highly controversial for the industry at the time. I mean, put Doom Eternal in front of Steve Jackson's face, I think he might have a heart attack. But anyway, despite losing the GURPS license, the team was undeterred, and this loss was actually a bit of a blessing in disguise for the Fallout franchise, as the team instead made the slightly derivative, but now iconic special system for Fallout instead. And the rest is, well, you know. But now, we can finally talk about the game itself, and see if Fallout still holds up in a world where we have a live service MMO in its name. Fallout starts with a cartoon of its now iconic Vault Boy getting sealed into Vault 13, and we then see an old-timey looking ad to reserve a spot in the vault. We then cut away to raw war footage of 2 power-armored soldiers brutally executing a bound Canadian rebel, who then laugh and wave at the camera. And we then see a power armor helmet in front of a waving flag with 14 stars on it. Wait, hold on. Power armor, war in Canada, 14-star flag? This isn't your dad's America. So let me explain. The world of Fallout takes place in a fictional alternate history timeline that differs wildly from our own, and there's no one main convergence point. But one of the biggest differences is that the invention of the transistor and the miniaturization of electronics never really happened, so computer technology stayed pretty much the same since the Cold War era. Massive, cabinet-sized computers are the norm, cars maintain a space-age retro-futuristic design, and the TV sets still look like those manual, clunky-ass CRT boxes you find in your parents' basement collecting dust, that can still only display black and white images. Technological advancements were instead made in the robotics and nuclear power sectors, like robots like the Mr. Handys, Robo-Brains, Protectrons, and more. And we even see an ad for Mr. Handy bots. And all these bots have pretty robust AI systems that almost match human intelligence. And most bots are powered by nuclear fusion, which by 2077 became a pretty widespread form of energy. Energy weapons were powered by microfusion cells, power armor uses fusion cores, and nuclear reactors were all over the place. And even cars were powered by cold fusion and filled up with coolant instead of gas at the station, because it was cheaper than the ridiculously expensive oil prices. The American flag also only displays 14 stars, because in the Fallout universe, the 50 states were grouped into 13 commonwealths for more efficient top-down governance. But the commonwealth system isn't really explained in Fallout 1 or 2, nor is it particularly relevant for these games either. It's just mostly there to show how different this America is to our own. Obsidian developer Josh Sawyer also made a map of the commonwealths, but it's a bit goofy. The Texas Commonwealth has an Arkansas-sized tumor. But anyway, alongside this technological diversion, America also entered a sort of cultural stasis, where the country looked like a high-tech 1950s version of America well into the 2050s. Men in their casual suits and fedora hats, women in their colorful vintage dresses and 1950s hairstyles, which is perfectly encapsulated by this Vault-Tec ad, which in this game is sometimes spelled as Vault-Tec, with a K and no T. We also hear the 1940s smash hit song Maybe by the Ink Spots, really cementing this vintage feel, along with setting an amazingly dour and unsettling tone. But this doesn't mean that Fallout is a complete retro future wonderland like the later games would have you believe, as when we zoom out of the TV we're watching, we see a massive destroyed city in the background, rusted, splintered and burned from nuclear hellfire. And what do you notice about this city? Maybe the distinct lack of color beyond poop brown and corpse gray? Or maybe the massive monolithic buildings? Or what about that imposing statue of a naked man protruding out of the tallest building's wall, to name a few off the bat? Something that always never sat right with me from Fallout 4 and beyond was the drastic shift in art direction, as Fallout 4 really went all in on the retrofuturism, and made Boston look like someone nuked the damn Jetsons or something. Colorful, rounded, sci-fi-ass buildings completely dominate the landscape, rather than the retrofuturism being a more subtle part of a nation whose ruins look dark, ancient, and imposing. And the comparison between the skyline of Boston and the intro city of Necropolis is pretty night and day. This is because despite the CRT box TVs and the 1950s style advertisements, the architecture of classic Fallout is what I describe as monolithic Art Deco. Pre-war buildings have dark colors and are usually accented with Art Deco-styled faces and figures, like at the cathedral, which depicts a winged warrior with his arms raised to the sides above the entrance, which may be inspired by the famous Niagara Mohawk building, which is in my hometown of Syracuse, New York, or the Sierra Army Depot's imposing concrete fortress, or the Gecko power plant looking like it'd be right at home in Bioshock, or the Enclave oil rig with the massive heads on each of the platform's legs, and on the damn pipes too. They feel less like cartoon buildings that got bombed, and more like the massive ancient ruins of a long-dead civilization. And I like to think that the tribals and the survivors of the Wasteland will look on these buildings like how an early Roman would look at the pyramids of Egypt, probably struck with both awe and fear at the sight of these massive husks of concrete and metal, silently judged by the stoic faces and figures forever frozen in place. And now that I've played through both classic Fallouts, I really wish Bethesda stayed with this monolithic Art Deco style. It works amazingly well to increase the series' dark aura, and the city that we're looking at is supposed to be Bakersfield, California, which looks like this in real life. These massive skyscrapers really capture the imagination, and these gargantuan buildings with carved statues and faces jutting out from the walls and pillars feels way more unsettling and fascinating than pretty much anything in 4 and beyond. But at least Fallout 3 stayed mostly true to this original Art Deco style in the DC metro area. Anyway, architecture aside, America continued on its retro-tech world until the 1950s, when the resource wars broke out in Europe and the Middle East, as oil fields dried up worldwide, throwing the globe into economic chaos, and the UN was disbanded, and some nukes were even thrown at the Middle East, leading the United States to become much more isolationist and hostile to all other nations, jealously guarding their Alaskan oil reserves, while searching for alternative energy sources and nuclear power, even annexing Mexico to shore up their resources through military force. But shit really hit the fan for the states in the 2060s, when a desperate communist China invaded and occupied Alaska so they could appropriate those greedy Americans' oil for themselves, which kicked off the Sino-American War, which would grind on for over a decade. America struggled mightily to recapture Alaska, and the war against the largest communist nation on Earth sent American culture even deeper into a massive neo-red scare. McCarthyism on steroids, baby. And all facets of life began to revolve around patriotism and fighting off communism, the culture and conflict morphing the American government into a hyper-nationalist authoritarian regime, an oligarchy of military officials, scientists, politicians, and businessmen began to form, and created a deep state that the Wasteland would have to reckon with. But later on, not now. But not only was an existential war for the Earth's ever-dwindling resources going on, but a mysterious and highly infectious plague, known only as the New Plague, began ravaging the nation, which led to draconian quarantines and lockdowns, and riots over the plague, and food scarcity made the government even more despotic, putting down these riots with overwhelming force. And that's where that cool-ass NCR Ranger armor comes from. It's riot gear to help suppress the continuous rioting over the dire conditions on the home front. However, despite these immense challenges, America still held together, annexing Canada over the course of the war to secure their supply lines to Alaska and to exploit the country for mineral and lumber resources their hungry war machine always needed. And they brutally suppressed Canadian rebels and dissenters like we see in the intro, who apparently, according to lead Bethesda writer Emil Pagliarulo, the second power-armored soldier, who laughs as he watches his buddy coldly execute a Canadian rebel, and then puts another bullet in his still-twitching body, is none other than Nate, the Fallout 4 male protagonist. Yeah, John Fallout himself is a war criminal. Okay, man. Whatever. Sure. Also during the war, the United States also made immense technological advancements, like near-sentient supercomputers, highly advanced robots, and the invention of power armor. The first T-45 models proving to be successful, but still unable to break through Chinese defenses and reclaim Alaska. And it wasn't until the invention of the T-51B models of power armor that the tide really began to turn. This armor turned a common soldier into a walking tank, and the T-51s were the game changers needed to finally break through and kick the Reds out of Alaska in early 2077, like we see in Operation Anchorage, about 11 years after the initial Chinese invasion. The Alaskan liberation was a massive win for the Americans, but this victory also more or less sealed the fate of the world, as China would be pushed to the brink after losing access to the last large oil reserve on Earth. And not only that, American power-armored soldiers also had begun land invasions of China, hoping to pressure the country into ending the war, but to no avail. The Chinese refused to give up the fight and put up vicious resistance the further the Americans pushed into the mainland. And as the Great War loomed, and nuclear war seemed all but inevitable, American politicians and elites began withdrawing to bunkers, safe houses, and bases to shelter from the coming apocalypse. The President of the United States himself heading to a large oil rig in the Pacific Ocean and disappearing completely from public view. And on October 23rd, 2077, the resource wars and Sino-American wars finally came to an end, as both sides packed each other up and smoked themselves like a blunt, and the whole planet got nuked back into the Stone Age, killing most people on Earth from nuclear explosions and subsequent radioactive fallout-induced desolation. However, not everyone got spontaneously air-fried by nukes, as in the years leading up to the war, the United States government, in contract with a mysterious and powerful corporation called Vault-Tec, had begun Operation Safe House, a project to build 122 high-tech vaults, massive bunkers to house thousands of people from a nuclear apocalypse, who would then emerge after several decades to rebuild and repopulate the nation. Well, that's the idea at least. In practice, it was a bit dicier. And luckily for us, our family were one of a very small group of quote-unquote lucky survivors who had secured ourselves a place in a vault. This vault being Vault 13, a by all means typical vault located in the hills of Central California, where we have lived our whole life underground as a vault dweller, unaware of the surface world, until now. And now we have to make our character. If you played Fallout 3 or New Vegas, you'll luckily already be pretty familiar with the special and Fallout leveling system. You got your classic special stats, so you have 5 points to invest with, and you can subtract from current stats to spec deeper into others. And you also got your classic skills like small guns, energy weapons, sneak, lockpick, and so on. The biggest differences here being some old school skills that were cut in later games, like the trap skill, a skill used to disarm unseen traps in levels, but there's not a ton of traps in the game. Plus, getting damaged by traps isn't a big deal at all, if you have the supplies to heal, so there's no real point in investing precious points into this skill. Same goes for the gambling skill. There's no real point in investing in it unless you really want to make some extra cash clicking on sprites of roulette tables or something. And there's Outdoorsman too, which I actually had to look up to see what it does. And apparently, it helps mitigate damage done by random map events that involve your character falling over rocks and cliffs and getting hurt by immense thirst while traveling. But I never invested anything in Outdoorsman, and these rockfall and thirst damage events were usually beyond weak, maybe 2 to 5 damage per encounter. So it's another skill that you can safely ignore. And Outdoorsman is way more useful in Fallout 2 anyway. And you also got skills that were rolled into other skills in the future, like the throwing skill, which determines how good you are at hucking throwing knives and grenades. And this skill mostly got rolled into the explosive skill in later games. And Doctor and First Aid are 2 separate skills. Doctor heals crippled limbs only, but interestingly, I can't recall a single time when any of my body parts got crippled in this game. So Doctor was mostly useless for me. And First Aid restores hit points and increases Stimpak effectiveness, and these 2 just got lumped into the medicine skill in future games. And we also got our classic optional traits too, perks that have a negative trade-off to them for even more specialized builds. Like you take the finesse trait if you're going for a critical hit reliant build, but I didn't choose any for this playthrough just to keep it as simple as possible. And for this character, Jarthur is his name by the way, we're gonna dump all our special points into agility, as agility is directly tied to your action points, and if you have 10 agility, you'll have the maximum 10 out of 10 action points, which will allow us to shoot twice per turn without having to bite the bullet on an optional trait, to make the early game real smooth, and to get the most out of each turn in this more combat-focused build. And as for skills, I tag small guns, as I'll be using small guns, which include small pistols to not so small shotguns and rifles, for most of the playthrough. Big guns and energy weapons can't really be found or used until the mid to late game anyway. And my second tag is energy weapons, so I can swap to a hard-hitting plasma rifle to take on the late game enemies. Plus, agility buffs the starting levels of all weapon skills, so we're really going all in on the combat build. And my final tag is repair, as I'll need a good repair skill to solve certain situations in the best possible way. But this won't happen till later on. And it's a fairly humble build, but Jarthur here is ready to change the Wasteland forever. Now, since this is an old-school styled RPG, it's very easy just to fuck up your build, or just make a plain old bad build, as you tag certain skills you'll think you'll use a lot, only to barely use said skill, wasting one of your biggest character creation steps, or vice versa, where you completely ignore a skill you later find yourself desperately needing. And there are skill books available if you need to bump up a skill by a few points, but it won't solve any poor character building, and there's no way to respec your skills and stats, which can be very disheartening to continue playing if you spend hours playing on a build, only to realize that you hate the build and want to restart. And to make an ideal and efficient build, you do need to have some solid metagame knowledge about the game's structure, like what enemies to expect and when, what objects that need to be fixed and interacted with, and what skills satisfy the associated checks, and what stats are needed to unlock certain dialogue options and quest steps. And a brand new Fallout player has to essentially just predict the future and go off vibes based on how they think they want their character to act. And it may take you a few tries to get a build you really jive with. Definitely took me a few cracks in making characters until I got the build that I beat the game with. So if you're new to classic Fallout and not sure how to build, feel free to use Jarthur as a reference or a template. You can then level up by killing enemies, completing quest objectives, and interacting with semi-important NPCs. And each level up will give you points to level up your skills, which can be raised all the way to 200%. And your tag skills level up twice as fast. And every 3 levels, you'll be able to pick a perk to make yourself even stronger, which is all up to you as to what perks you'd like. My only recommendation is the awareness perk, as it'll allow you to mouse over enemies and see exactly how many hit points they have, making battle strategy and planning much more effective. And once our Wasteland warrior is created, we learn from this horrifying clay golem pretending to be a human that the vault has a problem. A big one. Its water chip is busted, which manages the vault's water recycling systems, and without it, all the water will eventually turn into undrinkable shit water after around 150 days, and the entire vault would perish, and only Jarthur the Vault Dweller can venture out into the Wasteland and get a replacement. And once we accept our quest, we step out of the vault and into a rat cave. Before we can actually step out into the Wasteland, we gotta get our bearings first. And this rat cave is perfect for familiarizing yourself with Fallout's movement and combat mechanics. You have 2 cursor modes, inspect and move. And when moving, your cursor is a red hexagon that you use to command your character to move around the game's isometrical hexagon grid with. It's fine, and you can double click to sprint to save some extra travel time, which can also be turned on permanently in the options menu. But my only complaint with the movement here is that even though you can pan and look around the entire map, if you try to click on a spot to move that's too far away, your character will just refuse to move, and you're forced to click between shorter distances to traverse the maps. And you can swap cursor mode with a right click, which brings up an arrowhead cursor that you use to interact with and inspect objects. And when your character needs to interact with something, he'll do an interact jig. And try interacting with the skeleton to get some extra ammo. And pretty much all detailed information in the game is conveyed through this left side screen, which will describe things you inspect in more detail, log experience gains, as well as log battle damage and info when in combat. And although I personally think Fallout has some pretty great looking sprite art, it's still extremely limited in what it can actually show the player. So this context screen is here to pick up the slack and identify unique objects and NPCs for you. And you can tell an NPC will be at least semi-important when this screen describes their physical appearance, instead of just their NPC name. Also, throw open the menu and turn up combat speed all the way to max. It'll save you plenty of time you'd otherwise spend watching giant rats and goons slowly walk towards you. It's literally just throwing precious seconds of your life away for no reason, so crank that shit up. You also got this beast of a menu staring at you, all these buttons and boxes and numbers, but no worries. It's actually a pretty intuitive menu once you get familiar with it. The big box is your active item slot, which you equip in your inventory's 2 item slots. One slot will usually be for your main weapon, In the other, you can either keep empty for when town guards yell at you to holster your weapons, or you can put context-sensitive items in there to quickly whip out and interact with the world, or put a stim pack in there for some quick mid-battle healing. And you swap between item slots by hitting that red button above the inventory button. There's a map button that brings up the auto-generated map, which is kind of useless since you can just use the mouse to pan around and see the entirety of each map that way. And the chop button brings up your character sheet, and the Pip button brings up your Pip-Boy 2000, which we can use to read notes we find, log quest steps, get a reminder on how much time is left to get the water chip, and we can also pass time and wait using the bell icon near the clock. And it's even got an OG Pip-Boy, a space elf version of the Vault Boy, who used to be the real Pip-Boy mascot, until the Vault Boy stole his job and forced him to change his identity to Vault Boy 2000. Anyway, if we stroll around the cave for a bit, we'll inevitably enter combat with a rat, which opens up the combat menu with the options of end turn and end combat buttons, opening with that classic VAT sound effect. And all the sound effects in this game are so crisp and now even iconic. It's great shit. And once in combat, you can either move, shoot, or use an item, the green dot showing how much AP you have left. And here we can finally click that massive gun button to bring up a red target, mosey on over to the poor rat you're about to drain of all its blood, and let her rip. And hopefully, if you set all your prayers to RN Jesus, you'll hit the rat. And when mousing over an enemy, you'll get a percentage chance to hit, which is based on your weapon skill and your current distance from the target enemy. And tagging the small gun skill will let us hit these rats with our 10mm pistol more often than we miss, which the game generously provides us with to start, along with 72 bullets, to keep us strapped up for a while. However, you'll still miss plenty of shots, no matter how good your skill is. And you'll still even whiff those seemingly guaranteed 95% chance to hit shots several times, because Fallout still pays homage to its tabletop roots. So there's always a chance you'll roll that critical fail natural one and just miss completely. And while in combat, by right-clicking on the big item box, you can change from normal shot mode to aim shot mode, a burst fire mode that if a weapon supports it, to a reload. And the amount of bullets left in your gun is denoted by this very thin green line parallel to the box. And always keep an eye on it. It's easier to ignore than you think. Aim shots are the proto-VATs of this game, where you can pull up a green wire mesh of the enemy and you can target certain limbs. The head, the balls, the arms and legs, and even the eyes. And they're less likely to hit and cost an extra AP point to use, but it's more likely to crit if you do hit. And these crits can be massive if landed properly, around like 3 to 5 times the normal amount of damage. And attacking certain limbs can cause the classic crippling, like shooting at the eyes can blind certain foes permanently if the shot lands, while shooting at legs can slow down and knock enemies off their feet. And it's a nice combat wager for our character. Forgo a second normal shot to try and get a massive crit by blowing a hole through the eyeballs of our enemy. But for these rats, just blast the few you run into to get your bearings, but don't get drunk on rat blood and completely clear the cave. That's just a great way to waste valuable early game ammo for minimal XP. And it's also the game subtly showing you that combat isn't the end all of Fallout. And most times, especially in the early and mid game, most combat is best left avoided if possible, unless you're very well prepared. And it's a pretty simple system, and can drag at times, especially when fighting a group of enemies and their turns just take forever. But the amazing, powerful sounding gunshot effects and the awesome death animations always make combat feel satisfying. Especially when you win a tough fight and get to loot all that sweet gear off your foes. And finally, there's the skill decks, which we can bring up by clicking the right red button, and it shows all our skills that we can use in the game world. Sneak to start, sneaking around. Lockpick to attempt to pick the lock of a locked door or container. Steal to pickpocket NPCs. Traps to disarm traps, never touch this button. First aid to heal yourself and others. Doctor to heal crippled limbs. Science to interface with and get extra info from computers. And repair to fix broken objects, like pumps or generators. And the skill usages here are all classic dice rolls. And the higher your skill percent, the more likely you are to succeed in interacting with whatever it is you're doing your interact dance on. Pretty simple stuff. And unless the thing you're interacting on needs a key or some other kind of context-sensitive item, you can just retry your skills over and over again until you either get what you want or break the thing you're interacting with. And for this playthrough, we'll be doing a good amount of repairing. So I use this menu to bring up my yellow repair crosshair to fix or toggle any machinery in the game world most of the time. And you can also shortcut to skill selections by hitting number keys. And there's a control screen that you can pull up at any time to get a reminder if you ever forget what any of these buttons do. But once we get to the entrance, we step out into the Wasteland and see the sun for the very first time in our lives. And we exit into a large grid map We have no leads besides the location of a nearby vault, Vault 15, so we hit that V15 button and start moving due east, time passing quickly as we travel over the squares. And the initial time crunch of 150 days may seem extremely anxiety-inducing at first, and I'm personally not a fan of putting hard deadlines on players, especially in RPGs that encourage players to interact with side content and to fully explore like this game. But don't worry about it much, we got plenty of time. And getting the water chip isn't as time-consuming as you might expect. And along the way, a red crosshair representing us may turn into a sudden bolt of lightning. Random encounter time. You can run into merchants, hostile mutant or raider gang squads, random vagrants with mostly useless information and trading stock, and more. And it all depends on where on the map you are. If you're closer to Necropolis, you're more likely to run into vagrant ghouls. Closer to the military base, you'll likely hit mutant patrols who will absolutely tear your nuts off and force feed them to you. But if you're lucky, you may stumble across a fun Easter egg or two, like a herd of talking Brahmin, a massive dinosaur foot in the ground, the TARDIS from Doctor Who, and even the famous UFO, where you can find the insanely powerful alien blaster and some skeletal aliens, along with a framed photo of Elvis. What are they doing to that poor man? This makes traversal not only have some danger to each excursion, but it also makes you really consider each trip, as it burns precious days as you travel from place to place. So be sure to really maximize your activity in each location, and try to do all the side content before moving on. Also, be sure to save constantly. Save scumming is practically encouraged by the game. Save before and after traveling too, as there's no autosave feature, and you can just get really unlucky and stumble on a roving gang of mutants who will put you in the dirt, whether you like it or not. And not having already saved a load if you get bent over like this is unpleasant, to say the least. So be sure to save whenever you feel like it, and try to save before any battles you think you might get into as well, as battles just have a chance to simply not go your way, and you'll get critted for 95 damage by a thug burst firing a 10mm SMG, and it's curtains, so save. Don't forget, save. Unless you really love lighting your time on fire and doing the same things over and over again. Save. Do it. But anyway, as we travel to Vault 15, we'll come across this unknown settlement along the way, so we stop by to check it out, and we arrive at the humble village out here in the desert. We don't know it yet, but we're currently standing in the future capital of the largest post-apocalyptic society in the nation, and maybe even the world, the New California Republic, who at its peak would encompass almost all of modern-day California, from southern Oregon all the way into Baja, from the Boneyard to New Vegas. But for now, the NCR is just the humble town of Shady Sands, and we can talk to the door guards, a woman named Katrina and a man named Seth, the future first ranger of the NCR, and the face on the $20 NCR bill in Fallout New Vegas. But for now, he's just a lowly doorman. We can speak to him to learn about the settlement, and Katrina is essentially a walking tutorial on how to do world interactions. From Seth, we learn that Shady Sands is a peaceful, self-sufficient town, but they have issues with rad scorpion and raider attacks, which is some typical Wasteland settlement problems. And Seth points us to speak with the town's leader Aradesh for more info. So we head in, speak to this robed man, and mug jump scare. This is one of Fallout's famous talking heads, which were given to more important NPCs to deliver us a much more immersive and slightly unsettling dialogue experience. Most NPCs you talk to will just show up in the text window as they appear in-game, as a faceless, voiceless sprite standing in his or her isometric prison. So when you run into a talking head with fully voiced dialogue lines, you'll know that they're an important story NPC, or will give you a quest, or quests of some kind. And the way Interplay went about making the 3D heads for the game was an interesting solution to an interesting problem. Fallout's engine isn't a 3D engine, so to make these detailed 3D looking models, Interplay had created physical clay models of heads, which were then scanned into 3D models, cleaned up and textured, and then converted back into 2D sprites within the engine, which is some pretty interesting shit. There are 21 talking heads in the game, some looking better than others. Dudes like Decker and Gizmo are looking extra clay golem-y today. And the Interplay devs originally wanted 50 talking heads for the game, but the process to make one in-game talking head, from clay model to in-game sprite, took 8 weeks per head, so they had to cut down to 21 to actually finish the game on time. And they do look fairly uncanny, I can't lie. But I also think they have a distinct charm to them too, that ends up bolstering the post-apocalyptic setting pretty well, as these are hardened survivors who lived in a post-nuclear apocalypse desert, so they ought to look a little rugged, to say the least. We can speak to Aradesh to learn more about the rad scorpion problems, and we offer our exterminator services to him. But we'll tackle this later. For now, we go talk again to Seth, and hit the barter button to open up the trade menu. We need to trade him for his rope. We'll need it pretty soon. So I trade him a loose knife I took off old Dead Ed, and trade a few caps of difference, and I'm ready to rock. Bartering in this game is fine. You drag and drop the items you want to buy and sell, and balance out the values, and then hit the offer button. And if you pay equal or more, you're good, and you'll get better prices on purchases and sales depending on your barter skill. But unfortunately, you can't scroll through your inventory using your mouse wheel, so you gotta hit these arrow buttons to scroll, which kinda sucks. But luckily, Fallout 2 fixes this issue amazingly. However, if you're trading in pure caps, it's incredibly tedious to do, as there's usually a few hundred caps difference when trading items, and you have to either hold down the how many button until it reaches the amount you want, which moves very, very slowly by the way, or you'll be forced to button mash a few hundred times to even out the cap balance, to make sure you aren't actively losing money on trades, which is extremely annoying and time consuming. But once we barter for our rope, we move on to the nearby Vault 15, which is under this decrepit shack, and is old and abandoned, full of rats and mole rats, but that's nothing we can't handle with our trusty 10mm. And Vault 15 is where the settlers of Shady Sands originated from, which was a slightly less sadistic vault than most others, thankfully. Its experiment was to place dwellers with radically different political beliefs all together into a single vault, to see what would happen. It's kind of like a vault version of Zitter.com, which predictably caused a schism and mass exodus from the vault in 2097, where all of the dwellers just up and left the vault, half of them going on to found vicious raider gangs like the Vipers, Jackals, and Khans. And fun fact, the Vipers were originally supposed to be in Fallout 1, who were a group of stealth-focused raiders who worshipped the snake god and would throw you in a snake pit as a trial. Whereas the other half of the vault, the seemingly less murderous and thieving dwellers, founded the humble settlement of Shady Sands, with help from the vault's Gek to jumpstart their farming systems. And the vault was then left abandoned after the Exodus, and has been left to rust ever since. And we can also grab some good loot here in Vault 15. Don't miss those wall safes and lockers. And here's where we need to use our rope, as the vault elevator is just gone. So we gotta fireman ourselves down. So equip the rope in an item slot, and click it to bring up a yellow crosshair, and then just click the busted elevator to tie our rope down, and we then can explore the rest of the vault. And we get another rope, and a very Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior looking leather jacket armor set, and we rappel down to the final level, blast some gigantic rats, and if we walk towards this collapsed corridor in the bottom right corner, we'll get a message in our status window that the control room is collapsed, and there's no chance that there's a working water chip down here. Shit. Vault 15 was a bust, but it's okay, because we can still leave Vault 15 with a solid sack of gear, some dynamite, some grenades, some 44 and 10mm ammo, and a nice 10mm SMG, and that burst is filthy. But once done at Vault 15, we run back to Shady Sands to barter away my loose flares and other gear so I can scrounge up 100 caps for a very important man. This biker thug looking dude named Ian, a former caravan guard, who will accompany us as a loyal companion, who will put his life on the line and obey all of our commands without hesitation for a modest one-time hiring cost of 100 caps. And Ian is likely the first companion you'll pick up, and recruiting companions is incredibly important to success in classic Fallout, as although you can't control them directly, each companion is essentially an extra attack turn for you, and there are 3 companions and a dog that you can recruit to help you fight in Fallout 1. And if you recruit them all, you can assemble a solid goon squad that only late-game mutant hordes can go toe-to-toe with. And the only downside is you have to supply your companions with weapons and ammo on your own. Otherwise, all they can do is throw hands with the demons of the Wastelands, with little success. So it's a solid money sink to keep your guys equipped. Also, when there's a lot of characters in a battle, your companions will likely often end up shooting each other on accident, which can occur when a friendly is standing in the firing line of another. So you always gotta take positioning into account lest you blow a cannonball-sized hole in Ian's chest when you're trying to shoot an enemy, or vice versa. These guys can have some real dog aim at times. You can only command your companions to either stick close or keep a distance from you, and the rest is a total crapshoot at the mercy of the RPG dice gods. So save before any battle, like I said. Also, you know that classic Bethesda moment when your companion just stands in a doorway, completely blocking you as you rub your smelly balls in their face as you try to sprint and jump into their model in a desperate attempt to make them move? Well, that Fallout series tradition got its start here, as companions can easily block your path, as you can't walk on the hex tile that they're currently standing on, so my allies were door-stucking me a bit more than I would have liked. And I don't know why companions can't just be intangible when outside of combat to make traversal so much smoother, but whatever. It's a feature. So we use Ian's help to clear out the Rad Scorpion cave that's been given Shady Sands hell, Ian's extra firepower making it so much easier to deal with them and clear the whole place out. Also, if you need a heal from the vicious scorpion and fat rat combat we've been engaging in so far, unless you're in combat, don't stimpack heal from an item slot. That's just wasting time. Instead, pop open the inventory, switch to the inspect cursor arrow, and then hold down click on your stim pack, which will open up an item drop down menu, and select the open hand icon to use the stim pack right out of your inventory instantly. Otherwise, you have to drag the stim pack into your item slot, equip it, click the box, and then use it on yourself, and do a jig to actually apply it. And if you want to heal that way again, you have to re-equip a stim pack from your inventory, as the stim pack excuses itself from your item slot on use, even when you have extra stimmies in your inventory. So just use the context menu outside of combat. But with the rad scorpions exterminated and Aradesh cheesin', we move on to the nearby settlement of Junktown, which we learned the location from by asking the Shady Sanders what's going on in the area, and we stop in. Shady Sands was still a bit of a tutorial town though, getting you familiar with the dialogue, settlement, side questing, and bartering systems with little in the way of real choices and role-playing to do, besides kill the scorpions, or don't kill them, and be nice to Aradesh, or be mean to Aradesh. But now at Junktown, we can finally stretch our legs and make some real big boy choices. Junktown, as the name suggests, is a town made of junk, haphazardly thrown together sheet metal houses, and the town's wall is made of stacked up and rusted out cars. And it's all very Mad Max-esque, and the town is run by the mayor and owner of the general store, Killian Darkwater, who looks ripped right out of Beyond Thunderdome or something. But he's a pretty classy guy to talk to, and he's got a good amount of stock and caps for an early game merchant, and I purchased a nice new Desert Eagle off of him. And once we finish with Killian, this red-shirted goon named Kenji walks in, shouts that Gizmo sends his regards, and then tries to gun Killian down, weirdly unafraid of Killian's 3 guards, plus me and Ian. So it goes about as well as you expect for him. And Killian will then recruit us to help take down Gizmo, the owner of Junktown's casino. But despite the assassin clearly saying it was Gizmo who sent him, Killian needs proof from the horse's mouth to be willing to attack Gizmo, and he gives us a wire bug to get Gizmo on tape confessing to putting a hit on him. And we then meet Gizmo at his casino, but before we enter, we can see a dog wandering around outside, and when you approach him, he'll automatically think you're his owner if you're wearing a leather jacket, which we got in Vault 15, which is another Mad Max reference. So we welcome Dog Meat into our goon squad, and he's a really solid early and mid-game companion who can bite enemies up to 4 times per turn, and he has pretty great movement range. However, he's absolutely useless in the late game. He can't punch through strong enemy armor and gets eviscerated by all heavy weapons and energy weapons. And companions just love shooting the poor dog in combat with those oops misfires. We can also pick up our 3rd companion at the Scum Pit near Gizmo's. In game, he's wearing some leather armor, but in the lore, he's supposed to be wearing veteran Ranger riot gear armor. And this is Tycho, a desert ranger from Nevada, the future elite military branch of the NCR. That big junk statue in New Vegas is the Nevada Rangers uniting with the NCR against the Legion. And when we tell him that we're helping Killian expose and kill Gizmo, he says, "Yo, real shit?" And he joins up free of charge, as long as you side with Killian against Gizmo. And we then can speak to Gizmo himself, the fattest Wastelander you'll ever see. And he's so large, he's permanently fused to his desk. Iguana bits can't be that good, bro. He initially denies sending a hitman.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But we can smooth talk him into convincing him that we'd be a better assassin, which he agrees to. This being one of the game's first speech checks. Speech is pretty robust in the classic Fallout games, and it's much more unapparent than in later games. In games like New Vegas, it'll always let you know when there's a speech check available, and it'll even let you know if you'll pass it or not, based on your speech skill. But classic Fallout is much more obscure with it, as the game won't directly show you what text options or speech checks. You kinda have to intuit it out for yourself. And not only that, but some text options and speech checks won't even be available to you, unless your intelligence stat is high enough, as your intelligence also changes what text options are available. And that's where we get the low intelligence meme build runs, where you go around talking like a caveman with CTE and all the dialogue options.
You found the chip? Oh, that's great. Can I have the chip, please? No, not that. I want the computer chip. No, the chip. Just give me the chip!
So if you want to talk your way through preventing a genocide, make sure to dump into intelligence, not charisma, ironically enough. But despite my extremely pedestrian speech skills, we convinced Gizmo we'd make a great assassin anyway. And it makes sense that we were able to convince him too. The last guy he hired's plan was to waltz into a 1v6 gunfight and expose the man who hired him to his victim. Gizmo isn't the greatest judge of competence. You can then bring this evidence to Killian, or actually follow through and kill him for Gizmo. But let's keep our goody two-shoes on and give Killian the evidence. So we rally the Junktown guards, teleport to the casino, and completely gank Gizmo and his armored goon. Killian giving us 500 caps as a reward, and we complete our first real quest. And it's a great little microcosm of what makes Fallout so great. You can even go rogue and just execute Gizmo with no proof, which will make all the guards tell you to leave and not come back. Although they seem not to care if I'm around or not. Also, before you go, if you did the quest with Killian, you'll be teleported out of the casino once Gizmo has his chest cavity opened. So be sure to run back and loot his body. You can get a sweet rare Mauser pistol, which isn't very powerful, but will fetch you a nice sack of caps when trading. And next up, we head to the hub, a trading hub. Get it? A center map settlement where most of the caravan companies operate out of, which has plenty of great traders, like Jake the arms dealer, the bookseller lady who can improve your non-tag skills in a pinch, a drug dealer where you can pick up some Rad-X, and the dwarf general store owner. And these dwarf guys are often merchants in the classic Fallouts. However, dwarves seem to have vanished completely from the Fallout franchise after Fallout 2. A little weird. Where'd they go? Also, the water merchants are in the southern part of town, and there's no water chip to be found in the hub, but we can hire the merchants for 1,000 caps, who will send a water caravan to Vault 13, which will add 100 extra days to your water chip hunt, which is a solid 66% increase to your deadline. But this shit is a scam, and won't be necessary at all. Jarthur is making great time, actually. Anyway, when we entered, we noticed a large amount of caravans just sitting around at the city gates, and we learned that caravans have been going missing more and more often as of late. The locals and caravaneers are unsure as to what's going on and who's raiding the caravans, but it's creating a deep sense of paranoia in the hub. In the hub, there's an ongoing conflict between the hub police and a crime lord named Decker who you can work for as a hitman, or work to arrest with the hub fuzz. And we also learn that the Fargo Trading Company, a small reference to Interplay head Brian Fargo, when we talk to their unfortunate-looking boss, we learn about how Wastelanders have been reporting sightings of a damn mythological creature, the Death Claw, a powerful mutant lizard of some kind with large knife-like claws that can cut men to ribbons, and apparently, the Death Claw can even hypnotize a man just by looking at him. Somehow. Sounds like some stinky BS to me. And we can also run into this ghoul living in a shotgun shack, and this is Harold, a kindly old man who looks like mutated swamp algae. And another thing I miss from these old Fallout games, alongside the dark and imposing architecture, is how fucked up and inhuman the ghouls looked. Ghouls are humans who have been exposed to far too much radiation, but instead of growing a golf ball-sized tumor in their nutsack and promptly keeling over and dying, the ghouls' bodies somehow adapted to the radiation, and instead became nourished by it, allowing their lives to be extended to an unnaturally long degree. However, this radioactive immortality comes with some serious drawbacks, as ghouls always run the risk of having their minds rotted and going feral, becoming pretty much radiation zombies at that point, and their bodies also start to fall apart. All their cartilage-based extremities are completely gone, and their skin starts peeling off in huge chunks. But in modern-day Fallout games, ghouls look pretty alright, all things considered. They don't got ears or noses, but their skin is all there. They just look like they got their DNA spliced with some beef jerky. Hell, most ghouls still even got full heads of hair these days. But in classic Fallout, the ghouls look like honest-to-God walking corpses. Harold's skin here is puke green. His skin is literally sagging off his face, revealing his skull in parts. And you can even see his ribs, arm, and shoulder bones jutting out from loose flaps of skin, or just completely exposed. The dude looks hollowed out, making you wonder how he's even still alive. And it makes the mostly normal Wastelanders' ghoul prejudices make even more sense, because imagine seeing this thing walk towards you and start talking to you like he's your friendly uncle. And it's not just the ghouls, but the other mutants in this game are also pretty sickening and unnatural in their designs, like the centaurs, who in the 3D Fallout games is this reddish hentai beast. But in the 2D Fallout games, they're a flesh amalgamation of what looks like a human and a dog, both having a human and dog head, 6 human arm-like appendages for legs, and this nasty-ass goatsy situation coming out of their behinds. And on closer inspection, we can see that this blood poop is actually alive. It's a mass of writhing flesh tentacles that slithers on the ground beneath its body. What the fuck? And there's also the floaters. Mutated worms? Well, I think they're worms at least. It looks more like a mutant alien toilet seat that has an inexplicably large and floating head with dripping flesh bulbs that look like, well, you know. Apparently, the artist at Interplay who designed the floater, Jason Anderson, said they called the floater the, quote, sphincter monster because he, quote, used a porn image for its mouth. Nasty ass bastard. But despite how fucking gross and alien they look, I actually really like these old designs, and they really show off how mutagenic and nasty FEV exposure is supposed to be. And we'll see even nastier FEV mutations later on. Well, for now, We can slide Harold a few caps for his troubles, and he can tell us a pretty interesting story about how he got turned into a green swamp zombie. Harold here was born 5 years before the Great War of 2077, making him 89 years old in Fallout 1. Harold was lucky enough to get into a vault when the bombs dropped, which according to the semi-canonical Fallout Bible written by Black Isle and legendary Fallout writer Chris Avallone, was Vault 29, a vault that only housed children and teenagers 15 years old or younger, and vault life was tough, but stable, and Harold emerged in 2090, where he became a prominent Wasteland trader. However, trade soon became tough when Harold's caravans kept getting attacked in force by mutants, making business pretty hard.
Didn't. Got killed. Love that joke.
Until he met a Wasteland doctor named Richard Gray, who claimed to know where these mutants were coming from, and led an expedition to an old military base to the northwest. And sure enough, the military base was swarming with mutants, making Harold believe that it was some kind of mutant factory.
Because it was like someone went bargain shopping at Mutant Land. Phew, cheaper by the dozens. Can't figure any other reason except that being the factory.
The expedition squad then fought their way into the base, losing people to the mutants and deadly security systems until only Harold and Richard made it to the core of the base, which contained huge vats of some unknown liquid. A robotic crane then smashed into Richard Gray, sending him flying into a vat, while Harold passed out from his injuries. Harold then somehow woke back up in the wasteland, mostly unharmed, but Richard Gray was gone, and Harold began decaying into his ghoulish form shortly afterward, and made his way back to the hub to spend his days as a downtrodden beggar. Very interesting story. I wonder if this will be important later. But anyway, for the last of our hub exploration, we can come across this building that seems to have been converted into some kind of religious chapel. Worshippers splayed out on the ground moaning about something called the Holy Flame, in some kind of haze. And we speak to the head priestess here, Jane, to learn about this odd religion. But outside of learning that they're called the Children of the Cathedral, Jane is pretty vague about their actual beliefs, and what the Holy Flame is even supposed to be. But if you use the Tell Me About button, a special Fallout 1 only mechanic where you could type in certain words for yourself to ask about some hidden or obscure topics, which I never really used. It's pretty useless once you have a little bit of metagame knowledge, and the extra info isn't all that helpful most of the time. But if we ask her about, quote, mutants, she says that they're considered holy in their religion. If you ask about the Master, she says that the Holy Flame is their master, implying it to be a person, rather than some kind of spiritual force. And if you mention the Unity, she says that the Holy Flame will unite all races and purge any non-believers, which sounds incredibly sinister. So these Children of the Cathedral aren't to be trusted for now. But once done at the hub, we can next go to Necropolis, which isn't too far from the hub, and we arrive at a decrepit motel, which has ghouls all over it. Also, I want to take a sec here to discuss the music of the game, as I've completely neglected it until now. Classic Fallout's music really bolsters the dark atmosphere of the world. Tracks like City of the Dead here really instill a sense of dread and death in the players. This loud buzzing sound in the track evoking a swarm of flies, feeding on the death of the place. And other tracks like Metallic Monks and the Brotherhood Bunker are also great. Sounds of distant air raid sirens are paired with ominous moan sounds and noises from machinery. And the main Wasteland theme is genuinely anxiety-inducing. And Vats of Goo is an iconic track. And many other tracks just feel incredibly ominous and forlorn. And it's really great shit. And my only issue with the music is that there's only one song per level, and the song will restart when entering a new zone in the area. And the songs themselves aren't too long, so they can start to feel a little bit repetitive if you're exploring in the same area long enough. But anyway, we can blast some feral ghouls standing around in groups outside, but we gotta get underground to progress forward. But while in the sewers though, we run into some friendly homeless ghouls who ask us for some help. From the ghouls, we learn that their leader is a guy named Set, who sent them into the sewers for not being thuggish enough, but he still gives them the water they need to live, as despite ghouls being able to feed off radiation, they still need basic human needs like water to stay alive. And we also learn that Necropolis is on top of another vault, Vault 12, which has a functioning water chip. Also, it's not explained in the game, but Vault 12 is the reason why there's so many ghouls living here, as the vault's door was designed to not seal properly, exposing the dwellers to huge radiation leaks so the effects could be studied, and those who survived became ghoulified and formed a community around Set's leadership. But sweet! Quicker to find the water chip than I thought too. However, there's a slight nuance. If we just nick the water chip out of the vault and run, we condemn the ghouls to die a slow and thirsty death. However, they also have a watershed with a pump that can pump up groundwater for the ghouls to drink instead, and irradiated groundwater is no problem for these guys, but it's currently broken and not pumping up water, so the ghouls need their water chip. We also speak to the ghoul leader Set, looking just as grotesque as Harold, who asks us to kill the super mutants who are currently occupying the watershed, who had invaded Necropolis in search of their vault. Also, Set constantly refers to us as a normie, and I guess the devs hadn't come up with the term smooth skin yet, so Set kinda talks to you like he's a 4chan poster from 2016.
Better be a killer reason for standing in my shadow. Does next on the menu ring a bell for ya, normie?
And also, Set and his ghouls are cannibals who aren't above eating humans, as he threatens to put us on the menu if we don't comply with him. He's a pretty interesting guy. He's not exactly feral, but he's still monstrous enough to not have any problems with eating humans. And we soon find the mutants in question at the watershed, and this will likely be the first time players ever see these rumored super mutants in the flesh. On the overworld, they look like hulks, massive green muscular humans that strike an imposing image, easily twice the size of puny Jarthur here. And we speak to the one who looks like he's wearing a full kit of Rick Owens or something. And this is Harry, whose head is a sight to behold. He's got a chin the size of Nevada, and he needs straps to keep his upper lips lifted up so he can speak, which he isn't very good at.
You not ghoul, I knew, not fool Harry.
He looks powerful, yet grotesque, and I like this massive brick-headed mutant design more than, say, the cheese mutants from Fallout 3, or the lumpy Shreks from 4 and beyond. But be careful, because if you tell Harry to take you to the loo, you'll be instantly teleported from Necropolis to the bowels of the Mariposa military base, a very late-game area to meet the super mutant lieutenant, a highly intelligent cyborg super mutant with a British accent.
Oh, this is excellent. You know, I actually doubted my officers when they said they'd captured a prime normal.
Who at this point in the game will either kill you for refusing to join the Unity, or if you agree with him, will dunk a mummified version of your dweller into an FEV vat in a bad ending sequence. So be careful, and probably drop a save before you deal with Harry. If your speech is up to the task, you can smooth talk Harry to access the watershed without a fight.
Robot.
But he's not as dumb as he looks or sounds apparently, and he isn't easy to convince. He wasn't buying what I was selling with that dollar store speech skill. But otherwise, it's drill time, and it's the game's first real big combat challenge if you go this route, as Harry is equipped with a laser rifle, which can shred your pathetic armor and can bisect you easily if it hits. But luckily, Harry isn't the Chris Kyle of super mutants, and with Tycho, Dogmeat, Ian, and a little bit of luck, we can waste Harry and isolate and kill the remaining super mutants to clear the watershed of these green men. And here's where my repair tech comes into play. The water pump is this big doohickey in the corner of the shed, and with some junk parts found on the ground in the sewers, we can use the parts on the pump and repair it real quick, and bing boodoo bop, these ghouls will never go thirsty again. And we can now head down into Vault 12 and take the water chip with no issues from the glowing ones working down in the vault, besides these two doormen who picked a bad day to go to work. Sweet! Our quest is nearly complete. Time to head home. Also, side note, make sure you have all your business settled with Necropolis before you leave, because if you re-enter the city anytime after 110 in-game days, it'll be attacked by the mutant army, who will completely destroy the settlement and its residents. So if you want the good ending for these ghouls, just never go back there. Anyway, we return to the vault in our Cro-Magnon Man Overseer, who plugs in the chip and it works like a charm. But after we report our quest log in the vault's library, the Overseer becomes disturbed by what we saw. He says that based on our reports, the amount of super mutants appearing in the Wasteland can't be natural, and someone must be making the mutants somehow. and this must be stopped, or else the mutants will eventually find and destroy Vault 13, as vaults are high-value targets for the mutants, as dwellers in their mostly uncorrupted DNA make for the best FEV test subjects, and the Wasteland as a whole could be destroyed by this expanding mutant threat. So, once more into the breach, my friend. But to take on these mutants, we're going to need some serious firepower and protection. So from Vault 13, we'll head southwest until we come upon a small bunker with some big armored Buzz Lightyear looking dudes outside standing guard, and we can talk to the powerfully and schnoz doorman Cabot.
Hello and welcome to the Brotherhood of Steel. May I ask your business here?
And learn that this is the home base of the Brotherhood of Steel, a technologically advanced and highly militaristic faction that exists to hoard, study, and develop new weapons and technology, and to keep it out of the grubby hands of those unwashed wastelanders, who will surely use it for no good. And the Brotherhood of Steel was founded after General Roger Maxson, a U.S. military commander stationed at the Mariposa military base, had learned that the government was doing human experiments for an experimental virus called FEV. And outraged at the human lives lost at the hands of government experimentation, Maxson executed the scientists, revolted against the U.S. military, and took control of the base, establishing a chain of command with him as the leader of this rebel military squad. The Great War then occurred, which forced Maxson and his men to leave Mariposa and then travel to where they are now at the Lost Hills Bunker, where they have remained since, developing their brotherhood into the quasi-religious military that we see today. We asked Cabot if we can join the notoriously reclusive Brotherhood, and he says that the Elder will let us join if we do a quest for him. We must head to a place called the Ancient Order and retrieve proof that we were there. Sounds easy enough. But the other doorman says, "Oh man, they're sending you out on the glow quest, huh?" And when we talk to him, he flat out says that the quest is a fool's errand given to annoying Brotherhood wannabes, just so that they can get rid of them, sending them to go die in a massive cancer hole. So, okay, maybe this won't be so easy, but we need to penetrate this bunker by any means, so we accept the quest and head to the bottom right quadrant of the map, and we enter the glow. And the glow is a very interesting place. It's immediately striking. The massive hole in the charred bodies instantly spike your nerves, which isn't helped by the status screen saying that you're getting your ass fried by large doses of radiation, as the glow is the only place in the entire game where radiation comes into play, and if you waltz up to the ominous hole unprotected, you'll leave the place puking up blood, your hair falling out in clumps, and your skin melting off, like after a night at Marjorie Taylor Greene's house. And if you take on too many rads, you'll automatically die from radiation poisoning after a short time traveling, so you need to be prepared. But luckily, it's very simple to prep for this massive glowing cancer pit. Just buy or find 2 Rad-X pills and just eat them both before entering the glow, as it'll set your radiation resistance to 100%, making you fully immune to all radiation for 24 hours, which is plenty of time to completely scour the glow. And don't worry about giving your companions any pills either. They're completely immune to any and all radiation, like they got lead skin and silicon organs. And you also need 1 extra rope to rappel down into the glow from a jutting beam. So 2 Rad-X pills and 1 rope is what you need. And it's very annoying to travel all the way to the glow, realize you forgot a rope, and have to waste several minutes backtracking, which is not ideal. And it's kind of weird how much of an afterthought radiation mechanics are in a post-nuclear apocalypse game. It only occurs in one place, and there's an incredibly simple solution to just completely negate any rad effects and completely negate the entire system. But the glow itself is still a pretty cool dungeon overall. For the Brotherhood quest, all we need to do is loot the dead paladin on the first level and grab a holotape off of him to get us into the Brotherhood. But you'll definitely want to clear the entire glow out, as the bottom levels not only have some of the best loot in the game, but also have some very interesting lore to find. And to get to the bottom, you need to pick up keycards off corpses to open up electrified elevator doors to reach the lower levels. And you'll see these deactivated robo-brains and security bots, so be sure to spawn camp them for some easy XP, so they won't be a pain in the ass later on. And also in the lower levels, there's a massive supercomputer called Zax 1.2, the result of a pre-war scientist's attempts to make a true artificial intelligence. And we can speak to it and learn that the glow is actually the ruins of the West Tech research facility. West Tech being a defense contractor a la Lockheed Martin, if Lockheed Martin also made mutant goo and suits of power. And this facility specifically was created to develop something called the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or more commonly known as FEV, as part of the Pan Immunity Virion Project, a government project to develop a sort of miracle virus that could make humans immune to not only the new plague that was ravaging the country, but Chinese bioweapon technology as well. You can also try to beat Zax at chess, which was supposed to be possible to win if you had 10 intelligence, but the devs kind of fucked up the game logic that checks the player's intelligence score, and Zax is completely unbeatable. But based on the research notes that we find in the facility, FEV research wasn't able to achieve their desired immunity without some meaty side effects, and animals that were tested on grew massively in size and strength, and the researchers at West Tech strongly advised against human experimentation, as it would very likely result in some unforeseen consequences. And FEV research was then moved to the Mariposa military base in early 2077, where they made the massive green goo vats in the basement. And once we repair the generator with my repair skills, and get the power back on, and get past a tough fight against 3 Robobrain guards, we can finally access the testing areas, where there's a huge line of wall safes and lockers full of some of the strongest weapons in the game. Combat armor, miniguns, and the sexy plasma rifle are all available to scoop up, but all I really need is the plasma rifle, and now I can finally switch over to energy weapons, which I tagged at the beginning of the game to get my shooting skills up to speed real fast when I got to this point. And once the glow is cleared, we need to get our hands on some power armor, which we can do at the Brotherhood by either 1. Doing a quest to rescue an initiate from the hub, who is being held by some suspiciously strong thugs in a house near where Harold lives, and if you blast the thugs and rescue him, you'll be allowed to requisition some power armor as a reward. Or 2, if you head to the 3rd floor and talk to the guy near this power armor workbench. He says he'll let you repair and use the power armor for yourself if you get him a systolic motivator from Michael the Quartermaster, who we can smooth talk into giving us one, as long as you don't mention the guy we talked to. Kyle is his name, by the way. And once that's done, I use my juiced up repair skill and make myself a sweet set of power armor, which weighs a shit ton. So use the lockers in the room to store your items and make room for your new suit. And the power armor really does make you feel, well, powerful. Just look at how goddamn thick those cheeks are. That's some omni booty right there. And the power armor lives up to its name, and it really does feel powerful. It raises your strength by 3 points by just wearing it, and its high armor class makes all those small gun-toting thugs who have been giving us hell this whole game now only able to pathetically shoot us for minimal to no damage at all, who I then melt them down to their bones with my plasma rifle. And it's such an amazing feeling. Getting this better gear does make you look and feel way stronger than when you started, which was incredibly satisfying. Love it. And also while we're here, we can go talk to the Elder, John Maxon. John Brotherhood of Steel here is just a white Aradesh, funnily enough. And it's a shame that these clones' respective factions went to war with each other later on. And Elder John is a pretty nonchalant guy as far as Brotherhood members go. He's a little bit impatient, but otherwise seems like a pretty down-to-earth and funny guy.
Well, you see, there's 4 of them. And that's about all they can ever agree on. They can't even agree if they want to piss, much less pick a pot to piss in.
We can ask him if he knows anything about the missing caravans, which he says he doesn't know anything about. But he also says that he sent Brotherhood scouts to the north and south, the ones who went north never returning. So we volunteer to scout to the north and try to see what fate may have befallen them. And if we head northwest a bit and avoid any mutant gang squads, we can find the Mariposa military base entrance, which has several mutants outside guarding it. So it looks like we found our mutant factory in question. So we can return with this info and report to Maxon and tell him that we can't wait for the mutants to come and attack, as they'd wipe out anyone who stands against them at full strength. So we convince Maxon and the rarely seen Brotherhood of Steel Elder Council that we need to spank these mutants before they spank us, and they agree to help us assault the military base with a squad of 3 Brotherhood paladins. Sweet. But for now, we'll put the military base assault on hold, as it's a very hard dungeon, and we have to visit our last major settlement, the Boneyard. But before the Boneyard, let's stop by Shady Sands again for no particular reason. But when we arrive, we learn from Seth the doorman that Aradesh's daughter, Tandy, had been abducted by the nearby Khan raiders, and Aradesh pleads with us to help Shady Sands once again and get Tandy back. So of course we oblige. And to free Tandy, we can either simply slaughter all the Khans in the area, which there are quite a few of, so it's a long-ass fight. And at this point, it's more about making sure my shit-headed companions don't get themselves killed, rather than any actual danger to Jarthur himself. And these Khans can't touch this metal cake. But if you don't feel like committing mass slaughter, you can also buy Tandy's freedom and make a deal with their edgy as fuck leader, Garl Deathhand, where we can barter for Tandy's disembodied head for a modest price, which is way easier than going all Ghost of Tsushima on some Khans. Or you can 1v1 Garl in a boxing match for Tandy's freedom, but unless you're invested heavily into unarmed, this may take a while. But crisping these dudes with my plasma rifle was simply too fun. And I always make sure to do the Shady Sands quest to make sure that the NCR comes into existence. It's one of my favorite factions in any game of all time. But with that done, we can now head to the Boneyard for real. And the Boneyard is the Wastelanders' common name for the city of Los Angeles, which has been reduced to a massive sprawling ruin that seems to go on forever, the bones of the dead and hollowed out buildings giving it its name. We arrive in a gated community called Addytum, which seems pretty alright as far as Wasteland settlements go. It's a farming community led by a heavily armed police force called the Regulators, who fend off raider attacks and force Addytum residents to labor away in their farms. And we can speak to the assassin in white over here to get a quest to fix the hydroponic farms of Addytum. And be sure to do this quest if you're doing energy weapons like me, as he can upgrade your plasma rifle to a stronger, turbo version once you complete the quest, which does more damage and costs 1 less action point per shot, which is pretty fucking sweet. And to the north are the Blades, a small gang of survivors who are in conflict with the Regulators. And of course, we can take sides in this conflict. We can either help Addytum destroy the Blades for being a gang of thugs, the mayor even claiming that they killed his son and put him on a spike like Vlad the Impaler. But if we talk to the Blades leader, we find that they're hardly a vicious gang, and more of a group of unwashed survivors like anyone else. The Blades leader Razor also telling us that the Regulators killed the mayor's son, and are covering it up. And they want to take on the Regulators, but need weapons from the Gunrunners, who are shacked up in a warehouse fortress surrounded by a moat of dubious green goo. Probably not good for the air quality in there. And these future goated Fallout New Vegas gun merchants want to pack up and get out of their warehouse, but they're stuck here due to vicious deathclaws constantly popping up nearby that they can't seem to get rid of no matter how many they kill. And we can fight these deathclaws one map over in the Deathclaw playground, my plasma rifle doing some solid work in melting these fools. But to actually destroy the Deathclaws, we have to go down these hard to see steps and take on the Mother Deathclaw in a pretty challenging boss battle. This thing loves to knock you off your feet, which will eat up 2 action points to get your fat powered armor ass back up when your turn starts. But I take it down by doing the classic strategy of shoot and scoop. And we destroy the Mama Deathclaw and its eggs to liberate the Gunrunners, who leave behind plenty of ammo and weapons, but nothing will top this turbo plasma rifle at this point in the game. But before we leave the boneyard, we have to check out the boneyard library, which is home to the followers of the Apocalypse, a bit of an aberration in terms of Fallout factions, as instead of being a murderous raider gang, an expansionist empire, or some kind of paramilitary group with some odd beliefs, they seem to be a truly altruistic group of scholars and healers who wish to learn from the nuclear holocaust of the Great War to make sure a conflict that large never erupts again, even if their leader looks like a Mad Max biker thug who would get her car blown up while trying to rob and kill Max over 3 gallons of fuel. And this is Nicole, who leads the followers in the library here, and we can ask her about the children of the cathedral, whom she and the followers don't trust at all, and I don't blame her. Their beliefs are nebulous at best, and their general aura is beyond sinister. And Nicole tells us that they suspect that the children of the cathedral may be in league with the super mutant army, as follower spies have spotted Nightkin, special super mutants who love using stealth boy technology to turn themselves invisible, entering through a back entrance of the cathedral. She also tells us that she's got a spy in the cathedral named Laura, who we can talk to by giving her the code phrase Red Rider. So with that business taken care of, we can head to the cathedral and meet with Laura to learn what to do next. And she also provides us with a squad of follower fighters to attack the chapel if need be. Very nice. Very nice. We can also recruit the 4th and final companion at the library, a lady named Katja. She's got some stealth-related skills, but at this point in the game, she was way too weak for my party, and she did not last long. But I don't move on the chapel first. I instead move to attack the Mariposa military base and destroy those vats of mutant-producing FEV goo. So I roll up to the base, and 3 Brotherhood shooters show up to help fight, and we make mincemeat out of these super mutant guards outside. And it's a pretty great time. Until it isn't. As once you get a code off a mutant guard and get inside the base, the game completely jobs you, as you teleport right into a battle with 3 super mutants armed with heavy weapons right in front of you. And they get to go first, so needless to say, most of my companions did not survive this fight. I probably should have given Tycho an extra suit of power armor I got from both repairing the suit and finding the missing initiate quest, but I was too lazy to do all the inventory management. So, sorry fellas. It was very painful to watch them get blown into bloody chunks, but at least at this point, Jarthur was so powerful, companions weren't really needed anymore. Also, those bum-ass Brotherhood Knights don't follow you inside the base for some unknown reason. They show up, help with the outdoor guards only, and then refuse to do any more than that. So thanks for mostly nothing. Fucking bums. And the military base is infested with mutants, and there are these red and yellow force fields everywhere. You can walk through the red ones, but you'll take some damage while walking through them, and the yellow ones are impassable, unless you use your repair skill on the hourglass-shaped emitters on the side of the force field, which I tagged, so nice. Or you can chuck grenades at the emitters to blow them up and bypass them, which is a bit of a more expensive option. And then I thin out the mutants with my plasma rifle and make it through the base until we gotta face off against Lou, the strongest super mutant in the game, and the Master's right-hand man. He's equipped with a Gatling laser and can easily one-shot a power-armored character if he lands his hits just right. But if you keep Lou at a distance, his Gatling laser damage drops off a cliff, and he starts hitting you for 3 to 5 points of damage instead of 20 plus. And I just lob plasma balls at Lou until his head detonates. And his unique death animation is pretty sick too. And with Lou dead, we bust into the control room that's full of children of the cathedral. And if you try to interact with them, they all spontaneously combust and explode into decapitated chunks or something. I have no clue what's supposed to be happening here. We then interact with the main computer and start a classic self-destruct sequence. And I set the timer to 3 minutes and haul ass back to the surface, where a short cutscene of the vats being blown up plays. And with that, we've destroyed the Unity's ability to produce more super mutants. And now, all that's left is to head to the cathedral and destroy whoever the mutant leader is. And at the cathedral, like I mentioned earlier, has this awesome gothic art deco style that's really imposing and interesting. And inside we can find Laura and use our code word to get her to share her intel with us. And she says that she saw the children of the cathedral's leader, some dude named Morpheus, enter a secret staircase and disappear into a hidden basement. And Laura suspects that that's where the mutant master is located. So to get to the secret basement base, we'll need 2 keys from the Children of the Cathedral, which I'll be referring to as the cock from now on, one of which we can only get from Morpheus, and I don't feel like asking nicely. So with the followers fighters in tow, we assault the upper levels of the cathedral, kill Morpheus and his Night King guards, and swipe his keys. And killing Morpheus turns the whole cathedral against me, so I slaughter all cock in sight and use the keys to open up a false wall in the basement, which leads to a hidden underground vault. And this is the Los Angeles Demonstration Vault, a vault made to show the public what vaults and vault life would look like, which worked incredibly well. People were amazed by the vault's advanced technology and amenities, which fueled Project Safe House's development. And when the bombs fell, many people rushed to the demonstration vault for safety, the survivors later founding the various boneyard factions and settlements. But now, it's the command headquarters of the Unity Mutant Army, in the lair of their dark god. If you steal and put on some cock ropes, you'll be able to freely move throughout the vault without mutants opening fire on you. But I was on the damn warpath at this point, and I shot my way into the base against some tough-ass mutants. And I make it down to the 3rd level, which is covered in this fleshy-looking goop that's all over the place, as if the room itself is mutating. Fucking nasty. And I enter a long, fleshy hallway, the literal hallway of revulsion. But as we walk, we take damage, as the status screen says that we're seeing brutal hallucinations of dead people and our eye getting pierced by sharp bones. And we also have a massive headache. And that's because the Master is so mutated off that FEV, he's developed unironic psychic abilities. No joke. And he is now able to penetrate the minds of people and break them by beaming 40,000 hours of skibbity toilet directly into their brains. And to avoid this psychic damage, you have to go back up to the 2nd floor and obtain a psychic nullifier headset from one of the 4 psychers held on the 2nd floor, who are people who have had FEV injected directly into their brains and pineal glands by the Master's mad scientists, who want to awaken psychic powers in normal people. All this psychic shit being pretty out there, even for Fallout, and I don't see people talk about it too often. And after Fallout 1, the devs seemingly dropped the FEV-induced psychic powers angle after this. And if I recall correctly, the only other time these FEV-induced psychic powers show up in the Fallout franchise is the forecaster kid who lives under a bridge in New Vegas, who wears a psychic nullifier on his head and gives you predictions on future events using his psyker powers, although he's more of a fun reference than an actual serious character. But Jarther's brain is not so easily melted, and I just use my horde of stimpaks to offset the side beam attacks that the Master lobs at me from his evil-ass brain. And once I tank this mind invasion, I finally confront the super mutant Master and his flesh-covered overseer desk. And the Master's talking head is just iconic at this point. It's amazingly grotesque. He's a mass of flesh, thin limbs, and blobs of meat. And I can't tell if these things are supposed to be tubes, or spines, or what. And he has a thin arm with an eyeball on the end of it, and a disfigured and scarred head on top of a computer monitor body. And this is what remains of Dr. Richard Gray, the man Harold was telling us about back in the hub. And this dude is now FEV incarnate, a living mass of mutated flesh that can interface with computers, and of course the brain-frying psychic powers too. So all that weird goop and flesh that's all over this vault is all part of the Master's body. Ugh. And he speaks with multiple digital and organic voices, seeming more like a collective consciousness instead of a person.
So what shall it be? Do you join the Unity, or do you die here?
Join.
Die!
Join.
Die!
And by talking to him, we can learn his reasoning as to why he created the Unity and the Mutant Army. After being knocked into the FEV goo vat and transforming into a flesh abomination, Dr. Gray decided that FEV would be the key to the Wasteland's future, because as it was, the Wasteland was a deadly and desolate place, full of scattered and hostile communities fighting over scarce resources. So Gray began testing FEV by abducting Wastelanders and dipping them into the vats of goo, those who survived becoming the super mutants, and Rich saw huge potential in these hulking booger boys. They were strong, robust, resistant to disease, and perfectly equipped to deal with the dangers and hazards of the Wasteland, and only sometimes came out dumb as bricks.
Robot.
The Master thought he could solve all the problems of the Wasteland by forcing all humans to be changed into super mutants and assimilated into the Unity Army, and once everyone was a mutant, there would no longer be any more need for conflict or suffering, as all mutants would be united under the Master's leadership, creating a lasting peace for the Wasteland. A unity, if you will. And that's not a terrible solution either. Super mutants would indeed be much more well equipped to deal with Wasteland life, and the state of the Wasteland at this time is a bit dire, to say the least. So a united front of strong-ass mutants united with one common goal towards the betterment of the Wasteland's future could be a viable alternative to whatever the fuck we got going on now. And the Master used the Children of the Cathedral as a front to obtain new mutants and test subjects, as well as using their dogma to mentally prepare Wastelanders for some forced evolution. However, there's one fatal flaw with the Master's plan, as if you have an intelligence of 7 or more, you can talk to and get an FEV mutant research holotape from Vree, the head Brotherhood scribe, which reveals that through some autopsies on mutant corpses, Vree had determined that all super mutants are sterile, and if your speech skill is high enough, you can convince the Master that his master race will all die out after 1 generation, all his hard work for naught. And upon realizing this, and realizing that all this abducting, maiming, and killing of innocent Wastelanders to make his mutant army was pointless, the Master becomes inconsolable and activates the Cathedral's self-destruct sequence, telling the Dweller to flee, while they still have hope, before committing some explosive suicide.
It cannot be. This would mean that
All my work.
has been for nothing. Everything that I've tried to...
A failure!
It can't
Be.
be. I don't think that I can continue
Continue.
to have done the things I have done in the name of progress and healing. It was madness. I can see that now. Madness.
Madness?
There is no hope. Leave now. Leave while you still have.
Hope.
But my tongue ain't sharp enough for that, and my brain is too small to give the option to even appear. So it's time to drill this room-sized flesh man. And it's not an easy fight as to be expected of the mutant master. He has another Gatling laser mounted to his super chair, and Nightkin will spawn in the hallway behind you to deliver haymakers into your ass. But using my turbocharged laser rifle, I spammed aim shots at his head and eyes for massive critical damage, and I was far enough away from him to tank his Gatling laser volleys easily. And a few pew-pews later, the master goes kaboom with another sweet, unique death animation. You then clean up the remaining super mutants and bots, and interact with the active computer to trigger the self-destruct sequence, and we then run out, and once outside, we get another cutscene of the whole cathedral exploding. And with that, that's our quest fully completed. We got the water chip, saved our vault, destroyed the vats of FEV, and shot the master so hard he fucking exploded. I'm like the LeBron James of Vault 13. The mutants, leaderless and no longer able to make more of themselves, scatter to the east and vanish into the wastes to await the inevitable extinction of their species. And we then return home to Vault 13 for a much-deserved rest, but we're stopped at the door by the Overseer again. Damn, kinda getting sick of this fucking guy. who says that we're the greatest dude ever. We're the savior of not only the vault, but likely the entire Wasteland as a whole. But then he says that our aura is now simply too powerful. And I'm talking SGA tier aura. That's dangerous, as it would make the Vault 13 dwellers want to follow and idolize us, which would put the Vault's population at risk of getting too excited and wanting to leave the Vault in mass. So the Overseer tells us to do a 180 and GTF out of here, a cold and unfair exile for the literal Vault 13 Messiah. And we see the Vault Dweller, well, his back at least, suspiciously out of his power armor. I worked hard to get that for you, Jarthur. Where'd you put it? Walking head bowed into the vast wasteland desert to an uncertain future, as an encore of Maybe plays, bringing the story of Fallout 1 to a close. And also, if you act fast enough, you can murk the Overseer as he walks away. But I had Jarthur be the bigger man this day. But I kind of regret that choice looking back. And you also get the classic endgame slideshow to see how your actions affected the Wasteland factions and locations. Shady Sands became the NCR under Tandy and Eridesh's leadership. The Khans were wiped out and scattered to the wind. The Brotherhood becomes a powerful force in New California, researching all new kinds of technology. Killian Darkwater takes complete control of Junktown and makes the place safe and fair for all residents. Although siding with Gizmo will get you an arguably better ending for the place, as Gizmo's business acumen makes Junktown boom as a trading town. Necropolis flourishes after I solve its water problems, and I don't let it get steamrolled by mutants. And the followers all got exterminated by mutants.
The mutant armies, led into battle by the fierce super mutants, destroy the followers of the apocalypse. Barely human carrion feeders pick over the followers' remains.
The fuck? Well, apparently, no matter what you do, the followers will always get a bad ending because of an unfinished quest to find a spy within the followers' ranks. We can get a quest from a ghoul in the library basement named Talius, who will ask us to help find a spy from the cock. But the spy NPC isn't present in the game, so the quest is impossible to finish, and dooms the followers to be wiped out every playthrough. But luckily for the followers, their impossible good ending was made the canon ending going forward. But with that all done, that's Fallout 1 completed for real. And what a great adventure it was, as once you get familiar and comfortable with all the menus, mechanics, and some of the more old school and unclear game design choices, Fallout 1 is a really great experience from start to finish. The setting, music, and sprite are all absolutely fantastic, and the game really opens itself up for the player to explore, solve problems, and piece together the interesting story through your own travels and interactions, with little in the way of clear, direct guidance. And you're rewarded for exploring and investigating with interesting lore and holodiscs to read and get a full story on things. And it's also just a really solid RPG with really solid classic tabletop mechanics behind it, with plenty of avenues to take on and resolve situations in a multitude of different ways. You can kill, sneak, convince, or fix with your skills. They're all equally valid solutions to most problems, and the Wasteland is pretty much completely open to do whatever you want with it, from true pacifist to unlimited genocide. And the amount of freedom you have here is something the classic Fallouts capture really well, and going from a wimpy, broke and bumbling vault dweller who can barely hit shitty cave rats with his pistol, to a power-armored wasteland warrior who uses a flesh-melting plasma gun that's almost as tall as your character to melt mutated Hulkmen down to their mutated bones, is such an amazing feeling. And although the combat is really nothing too special, there isn't a huge amount of strategy beyond outnumbering and out-armoring your opponents, but the great sound effects and gory-ass death animations give it a really great amount of juice that keeps combat always satisfying. And I'd easily recommend this game to any Fallout fan if you haven't played it already. And the game is surprisingly compact and efficient. You can beat this whole thing in 3 to 6 hours if you know what you're doing. And I completely understand why this game is so iconic and beloved. But that's all I got for you today. Fallout 2 video is soon. Very soon. Hopefully less than 3 weeks this time. And if you're still watching, I love you very much. Goodbye.